In 2008, I went undercover with 2020 to a gun show in Richmond, Virginia, and I bought 10 guns under 1 hour. I went with former ATF agent Jerry Nunziato. Today, we're outside the Ohio Gun and Knife Show in Cleveland with Jerry to go to the gun show and see what it's like there. In terms of the gun show, can you explain to us why gun shows make it easy for criminals to purchase guns?
Well, yes. In 1969, when they passed the Gun Control Act, the first major federal law on gun control, they wanted firearms dealers to be the front line to protect the citizens against the illegal use of guns and acquisition of firearms. So people had to go to dealers, they had to sign a paper that said that they're not a felon, they had to get their address, identify themselves. Well, gun shows, you don't have to do any of that. Anybody could sell a gun at a gun show. There's no requirements for identification of the seller or the purchaser. There's no indications whatsoever of any background checks, and there's no requirements. So it's not illegal, it's just there's no requirements. So anybody that wanted to acquire a firearm that maybe is prohibited, just walk into a gun show and be able to buy one.
So in terms of a private seller wanting to sell their collection of guns or whatever it may be at a gun show, they actually don't need to run any background checks on any of the people they sell to.
If a person wanted this, other than a licensed dealer, if you're federally licensed and you go to a gun show, you have to follow the rules. But the table next to you could be somebody that's just selling they call it private collections, but it's usually their weapons they acquire specifically to sell at gun shows. If you go to these gun shows, you always see the same individuals. That's because they have 40, 50 guns on the table, show after show after show. But there's no requirement whatsoever for anybody to ID anybody.
And that's exactly why criminals or terrorists or anyone that may be, for any reason, prohibited from purchasing a gun would come to a gun show.
Yes, and it also makes the gun untraceable, so that they don't know who bought the gun, so that if that gun is ever recovered in a crime, they can't pinpoint it to anybody. And yes, terrorists, all the cells in Ohio, that have been arrested in our country, terrorist cells have got their guns at gun shows. A lot of the mass shootings, individuals buy their guns at gun shows. People say, well, criminals will steal guns. Well, you know, in today's day and age, you want a good gun. You don't want a cheap gun. So how do you know what house to rob to get that 9mm or that Glock or that high-powered assault rifle? So you go to gun show, they're all out there. And you could pick and choose, test one, see which one feels better. So that there is a lot of data out there that criminals will say they buy their guns at gun shows.
In 2009, New York City did an investigation of Ohio gun shows, and they found that private sellers, 69% of the time, still sold to people who said they would fail a background check. Do you see that issue still taking place today?
Yes, I've gone to this gun show, and the gun show run by this organizer, and I've witnessed just people not going up to them and saying, I'm not allowed to buy a gun, but there was no questions asked. And it's just a money issue. They're making money. You know, what bothered me the most is that this is a 50 caliber bullet that they sold to a rifle that you could buy at this show. That was actually at this show that you could buy that'll take an airplane out of the sky, a helicopter, penetrate buildings, no requirements whatsoever. Just buy it and walk out the door.
Wow.
Just pay cash, no questions.
That's incredible.
If I was a terrorist, I would come here and buy a gun and I could terrorize. The airport's just down the street. I could shoot planes out of the sky. And you talk about destroying a country. It wouldn't take much other than a couple of rounds of these.
During the New York City investigation, one of the sellers admitted to selling 348 assault rifles in 1 year. Do you see that as a casual sale?
That is a business, what they call engaging in the business, if you sell that many weapons. And by federal law, you should have a license. To sell 300 and some weapons, it's just not the average person who would collect them. They're not collector type guns that you would collect them and resell them. Collectors usually keep things, but that would be a prime violation of both federal law and probably even state law.
And why would someone want to sell privately? What would be the incentive for them to not be a dealer? Well,
the first incentive is that they don't have to get a license, and that's why they're not monitored by the government. Then they don't have to pay taxes on any of the sales. Like this guy with the 300 and some assault weapon, he probably beat the state of Ohio out of $15,000 to $18,000 in sales tax.
Wow.
Those guns average about $600-700 a piece, and not paying income tax. So you can see, besides circumventing the law for allowing people that shouldn't have guns buy guns, he's also circumventing the law for paying his fair share to run our country.
There's a Cincinnati gun show promoter, and he holds 34 gun shows a year, and he requires background checks at all of his gun shows. Do you think that other people should follow his example?
Oh, I believe so, 100%. Because if we got to get the hands out of the people that are going to misuse the guns. It's not the guns that's causing the problem, it's the people behind the gun. And if we could prevent 100 of them from buying a gun, just think how much crimes would be solved or how many people may be spared.
What do you think that we could do as a country to fix this problem?
I just require the background checks. Well, we have two things. One, we have to populate the databases so we get the mental health people in there.
People who are a danger to themselves or others by law.
So we got to get that up, to populate this data set that they use the NICS checks against or the Brady check. But then have everybody that buy a gun go through one of these backgrounds. I mean, if you have nothing to hide, you do it for a driver's license, you do it for a lot of other things. Why? It just doesn't, it's not going to interfere with your life or prevent you from owning a gun.
Right.
Well, just in Ohio, last year, almost 400,000 people had a background check. Didn't affect 400,000 people from acquiring a gun.
Right, right.
So it doesn't, there's no demonstration that
so this wouldn't affect law-abiding people. This would not affect good, upstanding citizens in our country.
The only way it would affect them would make their life safer, because it would keep the hands out of criminals.
So if someone tells you guns don't kill people, people kill people, what do you say to them?
I agree with that 100%. It's the person, so let's regulate the people. The guns aren't a problem at all in terms of it's the people we have to regulate and check on to make sure.